Okay, so here we have some Fender vintage noiseless pickups that a friend gave me. He's got one of those Steve Vai type Ibanez guitars that only has the one single coil in the middle and two humbuckers. And he didn't need them, and he knew that I needed a set for this guitar, so here they are. Um, One thing I wanted to point out, they didn't come with any pots. Now, if you've read anything about the Fender Noiseless, you probably noticed that folks say that they usually come with 1 meg pots. Some folks say that you shouldn't use the 1 meg pots, that you should use 500s or 250s. There's a lot of debate about it, and apparently Fender's changed their spec multiple times over the years. But this one, it didn't come with any pots, and if you look at the wiring diagram that came with it, it doesn't actually say anything about the pots. All it does is tell you how to wire it. So I don't know if they've redesigned them, so that they don't need different pots, or if they've I don't know if they've changed the design spec or what the deal is with that, but just thought it was worth noting. So currently I'm just going to put them in with my existing pots, and if they sound funny, I'll just deal with it until I can get some new ones at some point. But we'll see what happens. So I'm in the midst of installing some Fender vintage noiseless pickups, and the first thing I'm noticing is that the screws don't seem to want to fit in the pickup mounting holes. So I'm going to take a steak knife and just scratch out the inside of the hole a little bit to make a little bit of room. Resist the urge to do something stupid like sticking the tip of your soldering iron in there. But just something to look out for when you go to put them in. You don't want to have to try to thread it through the pick guard and through the pickup at the same time. It should be loose. It should just drop right through. So just wanted to mention that. Something I wanted to point out, I love these Wilkinsons. I really do. I wouldn't be switching them out. The only reason I am is because I play rocksmith, and whenever there's any, appreciable amount of overdrive, you get a huge amount of hum from these, like insane. So, I mean, if it weren't for rocksmith, I would never change them out. But because when you have them hooked up to an amp, I mean, they hum like like you'd expect, but it's nothing nearly as bad as what you hear when you play rocksmith with them. And no amount of calibration will make it go away unless you calibrate it to the point that when you have sustained bent notes, the noise gate cuts them off, which is unacceptable. So bye bye Wilkinsons, alas, with your Alnico magnets. Something else I'm noticing about these Fenders is the bobbin covers. The pole piece doesn't even make it to the hole on this one. I mean, it looks kind of shoddy, but I guess that's just how they're made, because it's on there flush. Just something to look out for. Okay, so just wanted to show you now that I got one of the pickups in. Just wanted to see if there was any difference in noise. So let's take a look. It's currently set to the bridge, which is the original Wilkinson pickup. Well, it's pretty noisy. As you can see, my amp's turned all the way up. But now let's try the middle position. which is usually quiet as long as the pickups are wired in phase, but they might not be because they're two different kinds. So that's a little bit quieter. Now let's check out the neck position with the Noiseless. So I would say it makes a little bit of difference in the noise department. So I was talking about the holes in the pickguard earlier. I did end up widening them using a paring knife, and then only doing the outside edges, because you know that's a really thin piece of plastic next to where the pickup hole is, so I only did the outside to widen the hole. But then it turns out I actually accidentally used the old pickup mounting screws from the Wilkinsons to mount them, which worked fine. They fit okay. I didn't even realize I was doing it until it was done. But then I realized, and you can tell because they kind of look like the heads, the bottoms of the heads kind of look like wood screws, whereas the Fender ones are very flat on the bottom of the screw, more like a machine screw, I guess. But that part of it seemed to work fine. I thought since I used these screws on the Fender, I would use the Wilkinson screws on, or I'd use the Fender screws on the Wilkinson, and they fit. But I don't know if you can actually see here, but I kind of cracked the plastic there a little bit. Not the white circle, I think that's wax, but the white line that's next to the hole. So you could use them, but they don't like it. I did get it screwed in there, and it would have been fine if I'd had to put it into a guitar, but if you want to keep the screws straight. If you don't care, if you're going to toss these, then by all means use the original screws because they match. The Fender screws have sort of a bluish kind of coloring to them, but you know, so you're fine using the old screws if you want to, but if you're planning on putting these in something else, I'd make sure you put the right screws in the right pickups. Another thing I wanted to point out about these Wilkinsons is, contrary to the Fender wiring diagram, if you were to look at a standard Telecaster, normally the black wire from each pickup would be grounded to the pot. If you do that with the Wilkinsons, just in case you ever decide to take them out and put them back in, that would wire them out of phase. So what you have to do is, in this case, I took the bridge pickup and I put the white wire to the back of the pot and the black wire to the switch, and that put them back in phase. I originally had it wired like the Fender diagram would tell you, with both black wires going to the pot. But when I did that, I discovered that the middle position was super loud and noisy, just like the bridge and the neck by themselves. And then once I reversed the wires, then it went back to being quiet. So just wanted to point that out. And now we're going to pull out this bridge pickup. Here's something else I just learned. The bridge pickup is a slightly different size than the neck pickup, and the string spacing slightly different too. If you try to put the neck pickup bobbin cover on the bridge pickup, the pole pieces don't line up, which explains why if you look at a picture of them, the stock picture of them, it looks wrong, like the pole pieces are all over the place, and that's why, because they have the wrong bobbin cover on. Now it looks like it's also a different physical size, because if you can see here, this bobbin cover doesn't want to fit through the bridge plate. So I'm actually going to have to take a piece of sandpaper and widen the hole a tiny bit just to get them mounted, which is really odd to me. But it's obviously Fender because everything else seems to fit just fine. The neck pickup fit fine, and obviously the Wilkinsons fit fine. So it's Fender that's made a non-standard size here, which is, kind of annoying. Also, I recently replaced the switch. I'd had that Fender switch back from the very first video I made, and I hadn't put it in yet. I finally did, and the screws that came with it to mount it to the plate didn't fit. And I don't mean didn't fit the plate, I mean the screws that came with the switch didn't fit the switch. I actually had to use the original Harley Benton screws from the old switch to make the Fender switch mount. So, go Fender. Okay, so my technique here, I've taken a piece of sandpaper and wrapped it around my finger. I'm just, obviously it's harder one-handed, but I'm just going in and out, widening the hole. So after a lot of sanding, I managed to finally get this bobbin to fit in the hole. As you can see from looking at the back, those screw holes don't exactly line up. But hopefully with the length of the screws, it won't be much of an issue. But yeah, the sanding, it was a lot of sanding. I mean, I was just using 320 grit, but I guess if you use something heavier it would go quicker, but I had to take a fair amount of plastic off, mostly up here at up here at where the low E would be. Had to grind the crap out of that to make it tighter in there, more like this one. But did manage to get it to fit, and slides in and out relatively easily. But so now on to the next step. Okay, so I wanted to measure the space. Looks like it's about 70.4 millimeters. So in case you need to make yours wider, which you will if you use the template that's online, you can kind of keep an eye on it and keep measuring it as you're widening it. So just in case that's useful information. If you measure the Wilkinson bobbin cover, it's 68.85 millimeters, so that'll give you some idea and the difference. So here we have everything all wired up and ready to go. Oh, notice the capacitor. That's a paper and oil capacitor. Apparently that's the kind that were used on the original Mad Cat. It's a 0.22, which is the standard. The original Mad Cat one was just a 0.2, and I think that one was a 400 volt and this one's a 600 volt or vice versa. But as far as the tone cap goes, the voltage really doesn't matter. Alright, so I got it all wired up with Fender Vintage Noiseless and did a little bit of testing. I noticed that it seemed a little bit too bassy for my taste, especially in the bridge pickup, but then again this was with the original 250K pots. They used to ship these pickups with 1 meg pots, and it seems that the higher the pot value, the more treble that you have. So what I did was I swapped out the volume for a 500, and that didn't have quite the effect that I was looking for. So from there I swapped it out for a 1 meg pot, and that definitely seems a little bit closer. The tone for the first 2 tests, I had the original 250K no load, and then what I did after that was when I swapped out the volume control for the 1 meg pot, I took the 500 volume pot, opened it up and modified it and made it into a no load, and then changed that and made that the tone. So for all the tests, remember the original 250 pot for the tone was a no load. So essentially the tone pot's completely bypassed. So the fact that it's a 250K shouldn't really have any influence whatsoever. So really all you're hearing is the volume. And then, like I said, I swapped it out, but then I made it a no load. So again, it's not going to influence the tone one way or the other. I think really the effect that it's going to have is when I do engage the tone control, it won't get dark quite as quickly. I'll have a little bit more tonal range there. So I've got a comparison I actually recorded. The little bit of music that I have at the beginning of the video that I played on the guitar, I isolated the guitar track from that so you could hear what the original bridge pickup sounded like. Now, for most people, I think that the bridge pickup on this guitar, the original one, is probably a little bit weak and thin. It's great if you're playing, you know, certain songs, but for the most part, I think that for a lot of people it'd probably be a little bit impractical and you'd find yourself using the middle or the neck position more often. So, really, the fact that you don't get quite as much treble as you did on the original might not be a factor for most people, and as a matter of fact, I hear a lot of folks, if I didn't mention this already, do use these pickups with 250K pots. But anyway, I made a comparison, so you'll be able to hear the original guitar track, and then you'll hear the 250K pots, and then the 500, and then lastly, the 1 meg pots. So hopefully you'll be able to tell a little bit of a difference. There's definitely no way to get the original sound from these pickups, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because I think the bridge pickup needed a little bit of an upgrade anyway. Neck pickup sounds great, no issues there. So hopefully it's useful.